get started. First, a few announcements.
Yeah.
First off, if you don't know, we do have a Patreon. My goal is that this coming week, I'm going gung-ho back into podcasts, YouTube videos, and devotionals for our Patreon. So if you feel like that's something you're interested in, go check us out on Patreon. And you can subscribe to that. It helps continue to further what we're doing here and help grow what the Lord is doing in us. 517 Ministries has a store. We're continuing to add more to it. One of the new ones. Abby actually designed that one. So it says Yeshua. It says Yeshua is my Savior and Torah is my jam. Oh, you got your shirt in. So we've got hats, we've got shirts, so we got all kinds of fun sayings and stuff. So if you get a chance, you can stop by the website and click on the merch tab or visit 517ministries.com/shop, and you can see where I'm updating it constantly. So keep your eyes out for what's coming up. Venmo, you are always on the Venmo, man. Again, if you feel led by the Lord to help and donate to the ministry to help what we're doing, we do have a Venmo account that you can give through. I knew you were waiting for it. You do awesome. And last but not least, if you were here last week, we announced this last week, and I'm very excited. Starting February 6th, the first Sunday in February, we're starting a new series called The Life of Yeshua, and we're starting with the parables. We're going to dive into the parables. It's going to be 6 weeks, 6 to 8 p.m. More details and info and registration is on the website, but it is exciting. I've been diving in, and I've already started working on the first teaching set. So I'm really excited about this, so we can really look at the parables and see what they mean and how they apply to our lives. So I'm really excited. Yes. Details and registration are on the website. All right, let's get into this. This week's Torah portion, the set that we're going to be covering tonight is called Miketz. And Miketz in Hebrew just means at the end. And it is Genesis 41 through 44 is what we're going to be going over tonight. And I can't believe that we are only 2 more weeks away from ending Genesis. We've already blown through Genesis that fast. And then we get to go to Exodus, my favorite book of the Bible. They laugh at me because every time we go to a new book, I'm always saying it's my favorite book of the Bible. So, Exodus is my favorite.
Until it's
Leviticus. And that's my favorite. Alright, so let's do a little bit of a recap. What we talked about last week. So last week, we were looking at the story of Joseph. And Joseph is loved above all his brothers. He's the favorite. He gets a royal cloak. We talked about his coat of many colors, as most translations talk about it. But we looked at how that it actually talks about that it went to his ankles and to his wrists, indicating that it was of royalty. His brothers hated him so much, they threw him to a pit and sold him into slavery. We see that Jacob then mourns for his lost son. Judah leaves the area, and in an interesting turn of events, has 2 sons with his daughter-in-law Tamar. So, if you weren't here last week, go to YouTube, watch the video from last week, and you'll see where we discuss all the events that happened leading to that. Joseph becomes Potiphar's personal assistant in Egypt. He finds himself in prison for a crime that he did not commit. And then Joseph interprets the dreams of the 2 fellow prison mates. So that's what I can't believe we covered all that. That's a lot. We covered all that last week. And so that's where we're kind of kicking off from today. So let's get into Genesis 41. And again, as always, if there's something that stands out to you, please interject. This is not you sit there and listen to me the entire time. This is you. If you have something to say, please speak up. Verse 1, Now at the end of 2 whole years, Pharaoh was dreaming. Behold, there was standing by the Nile. Then behold, there were 7 cows, good-looking and beefy, and they grazed in the reeds. Then behold, there were 7 other cows coming up after them from the Nile, ugly and emaciated. And they stood beside the cows at the edge of the Nile. Then the ugly, emaciated cows ate the 7 good-looking, beefy cows, and Pharaoh woke up. That's an interesting dream. That would be one of those that you wake up and you're like, what did I eat before I went to bed? Mm-hmm. Right? So I underlined this word ugly. The word ugly in Hebrew is actually the word reot, and it means ill or sickly. But if you were here last week, the interesting thing about this word is that the root of this word is the word ra, which means evil.
Wow.
So, I'm not going to go into that too much, but I'm going to let you think about that these evil cows came up. Just think about that. Ponder that for a moment.
Evil cows.
So verse 5, then he slept and dreamed a second time. Behold, there were 7 ears of corn coming up on one stalk, plump and good. Then behold, there were 7 ears of grain, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouting up after them. Then the 7 ears of grain swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears of grain. Then Pharaoh woke up. It was a dream. He's definitely eating some pizza before bed. Right? But in the morning, he was disturbed in his spirit, so he sent and called for the fortune-telling priests of Egypt and all its wise men, and Pharaoh told them his dream. But no one could interpret them for Pharaoh. And these were, when it talks about that he called for the wise men and the fortune-telling priests, these were the elite of the elite. These were very intellectual people who had proven themselves over time. These were not just your ordinary people that he called.
Right.
So when he called them, he knew that this was something they could do. So when they said, we can't handle this. So I underlined this, disturbed in his spirit. Something interesting about this is that when you look this into Hebrew, it actually kind of points to the idea of getting punched in the gut. So have you ever had somebody say something to you and you walk away and you're like, that just didn't sit right.
Yes.
Like that just hurt.
That's usually how I can tell when something is spiritual, or like if someone says just like it's like a low blow.
Yeah, a low blow.
Yeah,
that's what this is. So when he woke up, he was like, "Oh, that just didn't sit. Something that hurt. Something hurt. Something is not sitting well within me." So continuing on verse 9, then the chief of the cupbearers spoke with Pharaoh, saying, "I am reminded of my sins today. Pharaoh had been angry with his servants and put me in the custody of the house of the commander of the bodyguards, me and the chief of the bakers. Then we each dreamed a dream on the same night. He and I, we both dreamed, yet each dream had its own interpretation. Now there was with us a Hebrew youth, a slave belonging to the commander of the bodyguards. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams for us. Each man's dream he interpreted. Then it came about just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. Me he restored to my position, but him he hung." So he's recounting the story that we talked about last week, where Joseph interpreted their dreams and they wound up coming true. And when it says he remembered his sins, it's because Joseph said, "Hey, if this happens and you get back to your place, don't forget me." Well, this is 2 years later. He forgot him.
Wow.
Then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph. So they quickly fetched him from the pit. He shaved, changed his clothes, and came to Pharaoh. So there's 2 symbolic things happening here I want to talk about for a second. So it says that he shaved and he changed his clothes. And if you actually look into the Hebrew of this word, or into this verse, when it says, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, so they quickly fetched him from the pit, period. That there actually is the idea that it says, but, that they fetched him, but Joseph said, hold on, I can't go to the king like this.
Right.
So he shaved and changed his clothes. So what's the symbolism here? So he shaved. Shaving was part of the cleansing process of the Nazirite. We see that in number 6.
Okay.
So when he went and shaved, it was part of he was cleansing. I mean, he'd just been in a pit. He was just in a cell for 2 years. I'm sure he wasn't very clean.
How long was he in there altogether again? Because it was more than 2 years.
It was more than 2 years. I'm not sure if we know exactly. Yeah, it was a while, yeah. Then he put on new clothes. So he knew he couldn't come before the king without new clothes.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of the story of Esther. And Esther was married. She was married to the king. But before she approached the king, she went through this whole ritual of preparing herself before she was able to approach the king. Matthew 22:11 says, "But the king came in to look over the guests. He saw a man there who wasn't dressed in wedding clothes. 'Friend,' he said to him, 'how did you get here without wedding clothes?' But the man was silent. Then the king said to the servants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called but few are chosen.'" That was the first verse that came to my mind when I was studying this out. Is this idea of he did not have the proper clothing on to come to the wedding. So, and that was one of the first things Joseph said, "I'm getting out of prison, I'm shaving, I'm changing my clothes." So continuing on in the portion 15, "Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I dreamed a dream, and there was no one to interpret it. I heard about you. It's said that you can listen to a dream to interpret it.'" And I love this next verse. "Then Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, 'It is not within me.'" God will answer with shalom, or peace, completeness for Pharaoh. So Joseph was, first off, he was selfless. And that made me think, how many times do we take credit for Yah's work? How many times does God do something for us? And are we like, the very first thing we want to do is go tell everybody it was God? Or do we like, "Oh, yeah, thanks, yeah, thanks." And this train of thought brought me to the error of the rich young ruler. Anybody remember the story of the rich young ruler? In Matthew 10. Let me see my Bible real quick. I feel like I need to read this. Hold on a second. Pause, this is not part of my notes. Let me put this up. And I'm sure those of us that have been in church our entire life could probably quote this story, but I just want to read it. Set this down. 10. 17. I think that's right. Did I write it down there? Uh-oh. Hold on.
You have 17 through 27 on the screen.
I know, I think I wrote the wrong reference down. I think, hold on. I have to read this, see?
Oh, I'm just gonna
Not
get
today,
my phone.
Satan. I'm reading this Bible verse.
I was going to check it.
Oh, I'll find it real quick.
Or you
pull
left
it.
it at home.
I know, I was just going to check. No, check. There it is.
That's how I got it here.
I left it at home.
Mark, that's what it is. That's why.
That's your difference.
I was in the wrong book.
Yep.
I wrote the wrong book down. Mark, that's what it was. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's why I couldn't find it. That makes sense. Okay. So Mark 10, 17 through 27. Alright. Okay. And as he was setting out on his journey, a man ran up and knelt before him and asked him, "Teacher, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? There is no one good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, and do not defraud. Honor your father and mother." And he replied to him, "Teacher, I have carefully guarded and observed all these and taken care not to violate them from my boyhood." And Jesus, looking upon him, loved him. And he said to him, "You lack one thing. Go and sell all you have and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come accompany me." At that saying, the man's countenance fell and was gloomy, and he sent away grieved and sorrowing, for he was holding great possessions. And Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "With what difficulty will those who possess wealth and keep on holding it enter the kingdom of God?" And the disciples were amazed and bewildered and perplexed at his words. But Jesus said to them again, "Children, how hard is it for those who trust in riches to enter the kingdom of God?" So what was the error of the rich young ruler?
His trust in riches. I think.
Yeah, he trusted in his riches. Yeah, more so.
Well, I'm going to point out one thing to you that you might not have thought about. The error of the rich young ruler was his very first sentence.
Oh yeah.
He said, "What must I do to be saved? What must I do? What must I?" His thought was already on himself. Okay? Make sense? So I just thought that was interesting. I like that Joseph was completely selfish. He was like, "I'm not taking any of God's credit. It's all about him." Pause for dramatic effect.
We're thinking.
AKA technology.
Ponder.
What is it doing? Hold on. It's not. It doesn't want to connect to it. I'm trying to get it.
Moment of time. Crickets.
Seriously.
Crickets.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to boot it back up, see if it'll let me connect to it. There we go. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Sorry. All right, let's continue on to Genesis. Verse 17. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream, there I was standing by the bank of the Nile." He's recounting this to him. "And to my surprise, out of the Nile, 7 cows were coming up, beefy and good looking, and they grazed in the reeds. Then all of a sudden, there were 7 other cows coming up after them, feeble, very ugly, and emaciated. I've never seen the likes of these in the whole land of Egypt for ugliness." So you can imagine living in a society that raises cattle. You've probably seen some pretty sick cows before. And Pharaoh's like, I've never seen cows that look this bad before in all of Egypt. Then the emaciated and ugly cows ate the first 7 beefy cows. When they were devoured, one couldn't tell that they had been devoured. Their appearance was as ugly as it was at first. Then I woke up. Then I saw in my dream there were 7 ears of grain coming up on one stalk, plump and good. Then suddenly there were 7 ears of grain, dried up, thin, and scorched by the east wind, sprouting up after them. Then the thin ears of grain swallowed up the 7 good ears of grain. So I told the fortune-telling priest, but no one could provide me with an explanation. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Pharaoh's dream is one. God has told Pharaoh what he is about to do." So Yah told who?
Pharaoh.
But I thought God only speaks to the religious people. I thought he only speaks to the elite. I thought he only spoke to the... God was using this dream to tell Pharaoh. He was using it, speaking to Pharaoh. The 7 good cows, they are 7 years. Also the 7 ears of grain, they're 7 years. It is one dream. The 7 emaciated and ugly cows coming up after them, they are 7 years. Also the 7 empty ears of grain scorched by the east wind, there will be 7 years of famine. It is the word that I have already said to Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he has shown to Pharaoh. 7 years of abundance are about to come to the whole land of Egypt. Then 7 years of famine will come up after them, and all of the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will consume the land. So the abundance in the land will be unknown because of the famine that follows, for it will be a very oppressive famine. I was thinking about this. 7 years is not really that long of time. So if you had 7 years to where you were just super, 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 super blessed, how bad would the 7 years of famine have to be for you to completely forget how good the 7 good years were? Right. I could see, 100 years ago it was really good, and then today it gets really bad, and I forgot about those 100 years ago. But 7 years? That's going to be pretty bad.
Well,
now,
I'm sorry.
No,
We've
absolutely.
never really. Think of how frustrating it was during COVID. When we couldn't go anywhere, but we still had access to things. But multiply that by not having food and not having, what causes a famine?
Mm-hmm.
I think about the Great
drought.
Depression is probably the closest thing.
Yeah, right. The Great
seen
Depression.
here.
Yeah,
None of us were alive for that. We just, had grandparents tell stories.
Yeah, and so they learned to hold onto everything, and 7 years seems like a long time to me, but We've never experienced it.
Yeah.
Of course, look at the Israelites, how quickly they forgot God's goodness.
So
yes.
quickly. A matter of moments.
Yeah.
Like the day they left.
Uh-huh. So now let Pharaoh select a man discerning and wise and set him in authority over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh act by appointing administrators over the land and take a fifth portion from the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Then let them gather all the food from these good years that are coming, and let them store up grain under Pharaoh's hand as for the cities, so they may preserve it. Let the food be held in reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine that is coming upon the land of Egypt. Then the land will not be annihilated by the famine. Now the plan seemed good in the eyes of Pharaoh as well as his servants. I think it's interesting that Pharaoh didn't ask him to solve it. He just asked what the dream meant. And Joseph's like, while I'm here, let me just go ahead and tell you how to fix this.
2 for $1 deal.
Yeah. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, can a man like this be found, one in whom is God's Spirit? So the first time I read this, I was like, that's a good question. And then I got thinking about it, and I was like, I don't think he was actually asking a question. I think he was telling them, there's not. I mean, can you think we can find a man like this? It's not possible. It's not possible.
Like a rhetorical statement.
Yes. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. That's coming from a Pharaoh.
And then he like worships different gods.
Uh-huh. Exactly. You will be over my house, and all my people will pay homage to you. Only in relation to the throne will I be greater than you.
That's crazy. What?
Only... what's interesting is this is the same position he had with Potiphar. This is the same position he had with the jailer. Now he's getting this position with Pharaoh. To have a Pharaoh say, other than the throne, I'm not even greater than you.
Wow. It's quite the point.
I wonder if it's here.
Yeah, exactly. Potiphar's like, dang, I just lost my job. There goes my job.
What a thought.
Uh-huh. Because now he's over him.
Wow.
I sure hope he doesn't hold it.
But what's interesting, so okay, on that same line of thought, Rebecca, who trained him to already know how to do most of the stuff he's probably going to be in charge of now? Potiphar. Potiphar was already second command. And so, I mean, he was the chief of the guards. He was already high up. And when Joseph served with him, he taught him everything. Potiphar said, the only thing that I got to think about is eating. Everything else Joseph took care of. We talked about that last week. Everything else Joseph took care of. So Potiphar trained him for this position. Then threw him in jail, and now he's over Potiphar. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I appoint you over the whole land of Egypt. So we talked about this last week, that everything he did was prospering. Psalms 1. Everything he touches is prospering. All right, so let's talk about Egypt for just a second. I'm gonna take a little bit of a rabbit trail. We're in the middle of Egypt, and we're over the next few months as we get into Exodus. We're going to talk a lot about Egypt because they're going to be coming out of Egypt. So there's a lot going to be going on. But I thought this was extremely interesting. Egypt, the word Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim.
Sounds gems.
Mitzrayim. And it was very, very interesting when I started studying this out because I did not know what rabbit hole I was going down. Mitzrayim was a descendant of Ham, Noah's son. So when we think about, we talk about the land of Canaan, that was where the son of Ham, Canaan, settled. So Egypt was the land of Mitzrayim. Right? So we're looking at Ham's son. He's a descendant of Ham. Jacob was a descendant of Shem. Remember Noah's 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. They probably knew that they were relatives. So we think, in our modern times, we think in our generations. So we think, we usually, everybody knows their grandparents. Sometimes people know their great-grandparents. But that's as far as it gets. There's very few people that have great-great-grandparents that are alive. So that's pretty much the the distance that we know, right? They had a different thing, and I didn't put the slide in here. I've got a slide that shows genealogies and what bloodlines crossed over, like timelines, like how long somebody lived and who still would have been alive during those times. But so just here's a little info for you. It was approximately 587 years since the flood. So we think we couldn't know anybody from 587 years ago. Like this. I mean, Darren's done a lot of ancestry. He knows way back. But you have no clue any stories from those people. You don't know what happened to those people. Right? Mm-hmm. Noah's father would have personally known Adam. Adam was still on the earth during the days of Noah's father. He actually only died a little bit of time before Noah was born. So Noah's father would have known Adam.
Back then they lived for hundreds of years.
Yeah, when we get done, I'll pull up the chart.
I just was on my daily read.
Yeah.
Like Shem lived 500 years.
Yeah. I mean, Adam was 969 years.
Yeah, and his children lived another.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. So Noah's father would have personally known Adam. Jacob would have been able to personally know Noah. So there's only basically 3 steps from Adam all the way to Jacob.
That's crazy.
That you would have been able to know, personally communicate with. 3 steps. So it would be like you knowing your great-grandparent. There's only 3 steps, right? So, and it never crossed my mind. Pharaoh appointed a descendant of Shem to rule over a descendant of Ham. And if we go back and we read the curse that was pronounced over Canaan, he said that Canaan would serve his brothers. Yes. So now he's put a descendant of Shem over the descendants of Ham.
So he was prophesying Joe way back then.
Yep. Just a little connection. Genesis 9. When Noah woke up from his wine, he learned what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, "Cursed is Canaan, the lowest slave he will be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be Adonai, God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his slave." So, I just thought that was a cool little interesting twist of events that we are already seeing that curse kind of fulfilled out. So back into the portion, verse 42. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with fine linen garments, and put a chain of gold around his neck. All right, linen. We're seeing 3 things here. 1, we're seeing linen. Revelation 19, she was given fine linen to wear, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. Exodus 28, you shall make for them, this is talking about the priests, linen undergarments to cover their naked flesh. They shall reach from the hips to the thighs, and they shall be on Aaron and on his sons when they go into the tent of meeting. We see all throughout Scripture, from Genesis to Revelation, linen related to righteousness. Then he gave him a gold chain. Exodus 28 also says, and you shall set the 2 stones on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones, and when we get to Exodus, this is so cool to study out the priestly garments, as stones of remembrance for the sons of Israel. And Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord on his 2 shoulders for remembrance. You shall make settings of gold filigree and 2 chains of pure gold twisted like cords, and you shall attach the corded chain to the settings. Now the last and the most important thing that Pharaoh gave him was his signet ring. So the signet ring in that time was the signature of the king. If they didn't have to have a pen, they took their ring that had a special marking on it, and they could stamp it into wax, into anything they wanted to. It was like boom, dip it in pigments. That was their signature. It's like having a stamp at the bank. Just this ring gave the bearer the ability to exercise the authority of the king. So I want to take a couple minutes and just talk about authority for a minute, because this is kind of the rabbit trail the Lord led me on when I was studying this out. So what is authority? This is not a rhetorical question. What is authority?
right to set how things are, to be in charge,
To be in charge, power.
yeah,
Those are the things that we think about when we think of authority.
responsibility.
Yeah. So this is Webster's dictionary version. This is the definition of authority: the power to determine, adjudicate, or otherwise settle issues or disputes. Jurisdiction: the right to control, command, or determine. Luke 10:19 says, "Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you." Matthew 28:18 says, "And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth." Authority in the Greek is the word exousia, and it means the power to act.
I like that.
The power to act. And when you look at this word exousia, I pulled this straight off of the lexicon right here, refers to the authority God gives to his saints, authorizing them to act to the extent that they are guided by faith, his revealed word. So authority is not power. Authority is the ability to exercise the power of the one you represent.
That's good.
So authority has nothing to do with power. When God says he's giving you authority, you haven't got anything. And I
Right.
think I'm getting ahead. Yeah, here we go. I'm getting ahead of myself in my notes. You have no power. Only what Yah allows you to exercise of his power. Romans 13 says, "Let every person submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are put in place by God." Acts 19, "But some traveling Jewish exorcists also tried to invoke the name of the Lord Yeshua, saying, I charge you by the Yeshua whom Paul preaches. 7 sons of Jewish rulers, Cohen, named Sceva, were doing this. But the evil spirit answered them, I know Yeshua, and I know Paul, but who are
Oh
you?"
boy, you guys got whooped.
Right? The problem was, they were trying to exercise authority, and they hadn't been given the signet ring. They had not been given the right to act on behalf of Yah, and it came back to bite them. And if you keep reading the story, that didn't end well for them at all. So let's get back into Genesis. Genesis verse 43. Then he had him ride in the chariot as second in command, the one that belonged to him, and they called out before him, "Kneel down." So he appointed him over the whole land of Egypt. Pharaoh. So at this time, Pharaoh's had 2 identical chariots. 2 identical chariots. Pharaoh got one. His second in command got the other. When you saw them coming from a distance, you couldn't tell who it was from the chariot. So he is acting, we're talking about authority, that chariot was acting, he was acting in authority by riding in that chariot. Because from a distance, you better act like it's Pharaoh, because you don't know if it's Pharaoh or if it's the second command, because he's operating in the same authority. And this is a picture type of Messiah. Right? Philippians 2, "For this reason God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow." He got in the chariot, and before they even got there, they were saying, "Kneel, kneel, kneel." At the name of Joseph, and at that time, at the name of Joseph, every knee was bowing. And then we know that now, at the name of Yeshua, every knee will bow. Mm-hmm. Romans 8:34, "Who is the one who condemns? It is Messiah who died and moreover was raised and is now at the right hand of God, who intercedes for us." That right hand is a position of authority and power.
Yes.
That was Romans 8:34.
Yes. I can back up if I need to. Well, I'll back up one to make sure. Hold on. This thing's not easy to back up.
Oh, it's
Romans 8:34. Yeah, I just had to skip through them. Verse 44. "Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh." This blows me away. "I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one will lift up his hand or his foot in the whole land of Egypt." Wow. I'm Pharaoh, but everyone has to listen to you. No one can do anything without David's permission.
You just know
They-
that's like Yahweh.
Joseph's permission. That's a typo.
There's no other way. I mean, I know that the interpretation of the dream is a big deal, but like to have all that come with it, it's just Yahweh.
Absolutely, and we're going to see as we continue on in this. We saw earlier when it talked about when they went and got him out of prison. They said that it says that they took him out of the pit. Well, where did he start at? He started in a pit.
Right.
He started in a pit, got sold into slavery, worked his way up, and then got thrown back in the pit. And so he's getting promotions, and then it looks like he's getting demoted. But what we see in hindsight is that his next promotion is going to be even greater than the first promotion.
And that's probably like God testing him because of, what did he do? Like boasting to his brothers about himself.
Absolutely.
About his dreams.
Absolutely. We talked about this. We talked about this last week, but it was 13 years from the time that he got thrown into the pit the first time till this point.
Wow.
13 years. We can't even wait on God for a week.
Right, for real.
And he waited 13 years, and even more than that, he was making progress. And then all of a sudden it looked like he got knocked back down. So it wasn't that he just was waiting and waiting and waiting. He thought he was on the way to God's promise. And then all of a sudden he's back in the pit. And he still held fast. And still when he came to Pharaoh said, it's not in me, it's in Yah. Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphaneth-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, as his wife. Then Joseph went out in charge of the land of Egypt. So Joseph got a new name. What does this new name mean? Because we love around here to look up what names mean, because names are extremely important. So I got bad news for you. So one train of thought says that it means he who is called life. There's another one that thinks that it means revealer of secrets. The problem is, this is an Egyptian name, and the etymology is not precise. So we don't know.
Either way.
But they're both great. Yeah, he who was called
At least
life,
they're not
revealer
like
of secrets. Yes.
So now, was Potiphera the same as Potiphar?
No.
That's what I asked.
No.
No. The first time I read it, I was like, wait, what did it say? And I was like, oh wait, no, it's different. Never mind.
Okay.
So Potiphera was a priest in the city of On. That later, actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, that city later became the city of Ra.
Oh boy.
So yeah.
Potter Pharaoh kind of.
Which Ra, we know what Ra means in Hebrew.
Like Potter Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why is it important that he got a name change? What's the importance of his name being changed?
Is it like the outward
Evidence.
showing of his authority?
Yeah, well, so one, a name change, his name being changed showed what the king thought of him.
Right.
Just like when we see that Yahweh changes Abram to Abraham, he changes Sarai to Sarah, he changes Jacob to Israel. Every time they got a name change, it was an upgrade. And it was very much so what Yah thought of them and what their final destiny was to be. Yah changed people's names to let them know his opinion. That's what I was just saying. And we're going to find out something interesting that I think is a reason for his name change as we continue on. Verse 46, now Joseph was 30 years old when he began serving as representative of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and passed throughout the whole land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced in heaps. So he gathered all the food in the land of Egypt during the 7 years and put food in the cities. The food from the cities' fields surrounding the cities he put in each city. So Joseph stored up grain like the sand of the seas, vast amounts, until he stopped keeping record because it was beyond counting. That's a lot. That's a lot. If you have to stop counting because you're like, I'm just not even, we got so much, I'm not even keeping count anymore. But that brought me to this scripture, Exodus 36. And we'll talk about this when we get into Exodus and the tabernacle. But so, little backstory to this. At this point in time, Moses has been giving the instructions to build the tabernacle. And God tells him to go out to the people and say, anybody that God lays it on your heart to give, bring. Right? And then we get here. They received from Moses the entire offering that the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of the sanctuary to build it. They brought freewill offerings to him morning after morning. Then all the skilled men who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came one by one from the work he was doing and said to Moses, "The people are bringing much more than enough for the work of the construction that Adonai has commanded to be done." So Moses gave an order, and they proclaimed it throughout the camp, saying, "Let neither man or woman make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary." So the people were restrained from bringing more. Can you imagine if somebody was like, "Hey, we don't need you to give any more"?
Good.
That doesn't happen. Like, Josh, keep giving. Can you imagine if you had so much that you could go, "Hey, you're good. You keep it this month. We don't need it. We're good." But that did bring me to Malachi 3. "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, then there will be food in my house. Now test me in this, says Adonai Sabaoth, if it will not open up for you the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing you cannot contain." Until no one is without enough. That's how they were. That's how they wound up in Egypt. They had so much that he was like, "Hey, I can't even count this anymore. Like, we definitely have enough for the 7 years of famine that's coming." 2 sons also had been born to Joseph before the year of famine came, born to him by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, because God has caused me to forget all my trouble and all my father's house. Interesting that he says, "and all my father's house." So he doesn't know what has transpired from the last 13 years that he's been. All he remembers is his brothers threw him in a pit, and he's like, I can forget all of them." And I brought up I was watching a teaching this week that was very interesting. It brought up a neat point. It's like, why did Joseph never write home? Why did he never try to reach out? And this kind of points to, he's like, I just wanted to forget what happened to me. He's like, the Lord has allowed me to forget. Lo and behold, he doesn't know what's getting ready to happen, and he's going to get reunited. And the second he named Ephraim, because God has made me fruitful in the land of my oppression. The name Ephraim is neat because it actually means double blessing. Then the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine started to come, just as Joseph had said. So there was famine in all the lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was bread. When the whole land of Egypt suffered famine, the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, and Pharaoh said to all of Egypt, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he tells you." Interesting little parallel. John 2, 1-5. On the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. Yeshua's mother was there, and Yeshua and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, Yeshua's mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." Yeshua said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not come yet." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he says." So it's an interesting, little interesting parallel. Joseph, he said, "Do whatever Joseph said." Now Mary said, "Do whatever Yeshua says." The famine was over all the entire land, so Joseph opened up all that was among them and sold grain to Egypt. Then the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. Yet the whole world came to Egypt to buy grain to Joseph because the famine was severe in the whole world. So not only was Egypt saved, but the whole world, the whole known world at that time, all the areas around him were coming to Egypt to be blessed because of Joseph's interpretation and his obedience and his understanding and his wisdom.
So another picture type that through Joseph the whole world was saved.
Through Yeshua, the entire world was saved. Yep.
Foreshadowing there.
There's
The whole story.
The whole story.
This entire story of Joseph, I don't have time to go through all of the symbolism between Joseph and Yeshua because I'm barely going to have time to get through this as it is.
Oh, we love a pattern.
There's a pattern. We love patterns. So Egypt would have been very blessed through this as they sold grain. I thought it was interesting that they've been taking the grain from everybody and then turning around and reselling it back to them. So everybody might not have been super happy. I'm sure they were glad to have the food, but they might not have been super happy that they were having to buy back their own grain.
Did they get to voluntarily give the fifth, or I imagine?
It doesn't say. It doesn't. I imagine not.
Did the government?
Yeah,
did they buy it from them?
I'm sure Egypt probably just took it.
Sounds like a
Like they do
system.
these days.
Yep.
I'm just saying. At least it was just 20%. Just saying. Famine.
More than enough. What's the problem?
Exactly. They did 20%. Why are they taking 40? Anyways, different Egypt. But it was interesting because famine would cripple an economy, and so Egypt was blessed because they were able to sell this back to the people. Because a famine we don't have the association that a famine or how a famine would really affect them. So that had a lot to do with their economy and their monetary system. So if people couldn't grow crops, there wasn't things to trade for money, so it would have completely crippled the economy system of the nation.
Well, like all their livestock and everything would have died.
Livestock would have died. There would have been no grain or produce, things to trade for money. So the government wouldn't have been getting their taxes. So
It would cripple everything.
it would have crippled the entire nation. And that's why earlier it talked about that it could annihilate the city. He said, Joseph was telling him, do these things so the city doesn't get wiped out. So back to, we'll talk real quick on Egypt. A couple more things to think about with this picture type of Egypt. Egypt is going to play a crucial role in the entire biblical narrative. We're going to see that as we continue to study. Places and cities often have a duality within them. So places are a physical thing, but most of the time they also represent something spiritually. And if we think about this, for Abraham, Egypt was a place of help during a famine. Joseph, Egypt was a place of heartache, but also exaltation. Jacob and his family, we're going to see this in a minute, Egypt to them will be a place of refuge, but then it will also eventually be a place of slavery. Jeremiah talks about that Egypt became a place of captivity for him. For Joseph and Mary, Egypt becomes a place of safety. They flee to Egypt.
Right.
So as we move into Exodus, we talked about it, we got 2 more weeks in Genesis, and then we're jumping into Exodus. And Exodus is really going to hit hard on this theme of Egypt and what it means. So as we move into Exodus, we will see Egypt in a bunch of different lights, but we're also going to start to point out that Egypt is still in us. You know, what things are happening in our lives that are because of this slavery that we're in, because of Egypt, the different things. We're going to see that as we continue on. With all of this, however, we will see the divine intervention of Yah in it all. So everything that Joseph went through is like, we can look back and go, well, that was just God leading him along the way. To him, that was an incredible journey.
13 years?
13 years to get from the pit, to start to become exalted, to back to the pit, to then finally ruler over Egypt. So here's my challenge for you as far as this goes. Start studying a little bit on Egypt. Look at it physically, look at it spiritually. Just do a little, just on your own. Just start looking into the picture types that Egypt is in Scripture. Any questions on chapter 41? That's the longest part of this entire night right here. That was the big chunk of it. Any questions on 41? Anything come up that anybody thought about before we continue on? All right, let's jump into we'll fly through the rest of this. Yes?
I just thought it was interesting. I never paid attention to how young he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm 34. He
Yep.
was only 30,
Yep.
and he was already seeing all this, working with Pharaoh and being put on this pedestal because of everything that Yah had did for him and everything that it kind of gives me hope. You know, like...
Well, and to put it in perspective too, Abraham was 75
right.
the first time he talked with Yah. And where Joseph is already seeing the provisions of Yah at 30.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting who he gave him to marry. The daughter of a priest. And so, was that like, because they worship the sun god?
Mm-hmm.
So was he like actively involved with like that as a priest?
Oh, the priest would have been. Yeah. He was given the daughter of a priest that, yeah. Absolutely.
Seems like that could have been a conflict.
Yeah, well, and we're going to see as we continue on over the next couple weeks, we're going to see the redemption work that has to take place that brings Manasseh and Ephraim into the tribe of Israel. I mean, we'll see how Jacob winds up blessing them and adopting them in to redeem them from that Egyptian. Because traditionally, from what I've studied, traditionally, the lineage, or not the lineage, but the nationality heritage in this day and age actually was more closely related to the mother. So they would have been considered Egyptians.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Because of their mother. So the importance we're going to see later on of Jacob adopting them and blessing them as his own sons is extremely crucial because of the lineage that we see that continues to play on out.
So I'm
Coffee's cool.
I wonder if being married, like that point you're bringing up about marrying the daughter of a priest who worshiped false gods, if that didn't bring some trouble down through the lineage.
Oh, I'm sure it absolutely could have.
Because didn't Isaac, when he married, didn't Rebecca bring gods with her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and she lied about it. And
So there is some interesting stuff as we continue on, and we can get into deeper talk and deeper study later. But Ephraim winds up becoming the northern kingdom of Israel that winds up getting scattered. So there definitely is a potential for problems. But we see that all through the genealogy.
And you see through I was just thinking, and you see through Scripture how the Lord has a man of God marry a prostitute. He keeps having parallels of the
Redemption.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's taking the sinner
Yep.
to give them chance at life.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Got a wolf of that love.
I know, right?
Alright, let's get going. Let's get into chapter 42. Alright, ready? Yeah. Here we go. Verse 1. Now Jacob saw there was grain in Egypt. So Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you looking at each other?" Which is interesting because he's sitting there. They're just kind of standing there. And he's like, "Hey, why are you just standing around? What are you doing? Get down to Egypt."
He's starting to do that a little too well.
Then he said, "Look, I've heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some grain for us so that we will live and not die." Like, it was that serious. Like, they needed grain to eat. So Joseph's brothers went down, 10 of them, to buy grain from Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother Jacob, did not sin, for he said an accident might happen to him. So we've talked about this before. Jacob has this problem with favoritism. It started with Joseph. He gave him a coat, caused lots of problems. Now he's doing the same thing with Benjamin. He's not sending him down. He's like, "Oh, an accident might happen." So he's already shown a favor. We remember Joseph and Benjamin were the sons of his favorite wife. And so he had a little bit of a fondness to those guys. So how did this make his brothers feel? Like, "Hey, y'all go down there to Egypt. What about him?" "No, he's staying with me. I don't want anything to happen to him."
Oh, what are we talking about?
When we chop liver?
They have to be used to it at this point. Like, okay, yeah.
But this is what but check this
You need to
out.
read the book on
This
that.
is what I thought was interesting. This is what I thought was interesting. They got rid of Joseph because he was the favorite. And they thought, let's get rid of him. And then that'll solve all our problems. Then Dad will like us all, right? Well, no, now they have another problem.
He just picked a different one.
Joseph is not only memorialized, they also have a living.
Joseph even said when he found out what had happened to Joseph, that he was going to, Jacob even said when he found out what had happened to Joseph, he said, "I will go down to my grave mourning for Joseph." He was the favorite, and now he's replaced him with Benjamin. Their problems still aren't fixed.
It almost sounds like he almost doesn't believe him. Like what happened to Joseph to him.
Could be, yeah.
The comments
I had that thought
Yeah.
also from
I never thought of that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Well, he knew the problems they had.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
That's a long time.
Well, and we talked about it last week too, that as soon as they came back with the coat, he just automatically went in the morning and was like, "Oh, he's been torn apart." He never once questioned them. He never asked them any questions. Like, what's going on here? So the sons of Israel went to buy grain among the others who were coming, because the famine was in the land of Canaan. So they're not the only ones. There's a lot of different people from a lot of different nations that are coming to buy grain. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the provider of grain for all the people of the earth. Then can you imagine being in charge Yeah, you're the one that's
Feeding
that saved the
world.
entire. Yeah, you're in charge of feeding the
But,
world.
but Dan, too, you have there, the famine was in the land of Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the curse that came through.
Yeah. Well, the only reason the famine wasn't in Egypt is because they actually had grain.
Saved up.
Yep. So check this out. Then Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. This is his first dream. We talked about this last week. The two dreams that Joseph had. Yeah, the first dream he had was he went to his brothers and he said, "Your sheaves were bowing down to my sheaf."
Timing.
Grain.
It's all about timing.
So this is his first dream fulfilled. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he made himself unrecognizable to them. Then he spoke harshly and said to them, "Where have you come from?" "From the land of Canaan," they said, "to buy grain as food." Remember we talked about the name change? Mm-hmm. If all the people of the land had been calling him Joseph,
right.
they would have been like, "I recognize this guy."
Well,
Maybe I
and 13 years.
Yeah.
Like, you don't look, well, not most of us familiar to what we look like.
And after being in a pit for
Yeah.
13 years.
Well,
Well,
and all
and-
Egyptian clothing, probably.
And he probably would have been, so the Hebrews of the time would have had beards. They would have,
And he probably had the
he was
makeup.
clean shaven. If he was an Egyptian at the time, he's clean shaven. Probably has head shaved. A lot of different things that they did in their culture that he would have been adapted to. But if he still would have been called Joseph, they'd have been like, Joseph. I know that name, Joseph. That's a Hebrew name. Why don't I know this name?
Right.
So he got an Egyptian name, which very much helped disguise him. Though Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. John 1:10-11. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, but the world did not know him. They did not recognize him.
That's good.
He came to his own, but his own did not receive him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams he had dreamed about them. He said to them, "You're spies. You've come to see the undefended places in the land."
Just had to have a moment.
I'm not sure
He just
entirely
had to have a
Joseph's
moment.
even remotely forgiven them at that point.
No, he's definitely using this to his advantage.
Ay, sheesh.
"No, my lord," they said, "your servants came to buy grain as food. All of us, we are sons of one man. We're honest. Your servants have never been spies." "Not so," he said to them. "Rather, you've come to see the undefended places in the land." He's staying on this one. But they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers." Remember this part of the story. We're going to come back to this in a minute. "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Look, the youngest is with our father today, and their other one is no more."
Yeah, I remember he's thinking.
He's standing right in front of you.
He's like,
Joseph said to them, "It's just like I told you. You're spies." He's staying on the spies thing. "By this you'll be tested. By the life of Pharaoh. You'll not leave from here until your youngest brother comes here. Send one from among yourselves to get your brother while you remain confined in order to test your words, to see whether the truth is with you. If not, by the life of Pharaoh, you're definitely spies."
I have a question quick.
Yeah.
So, Benjamin was born before Joseph was gone. Yes? No? He must be.
He probably would not have known much. Benjamin was probably very, very, very,
Okay,
very
yeah,
little.
'cause, I mean, if he did know about him then, he had to have been.
Yeah, and just the 13 year. I mean, in we think 13 years from me forward, we don't think of it as that much, but 0 to 13 is a very, very large gap in maturity and age and look. And so there definitely would have been.
So he's a lot more by now, isn't it? Like
By more, yeah.
14,
So you got 13 to him to get to 30. Now he's 37 by the time the famine starts. So at this point, close to 40 years old. Because he was 30 when he took over rulership. Then he had 7 years of
The famine.
good.
Oh, then, yeah.
And then now they're into the famine. So he's 37 at the minimum. He could be pushing 40 by this point. Because we don't know where,
So old.
we don't know at
It's
what
really
point in the,
how long
You know what?
looking at each other.
yeah. So he put them together in custody for 3 days. 3 days, foreshadow of Jonah, Messiah.
Was it 3 days and 3 nights? Just saying.
Well, but this is interesting. So if we think about this too, Joseph was in prison, but it said they took him out of a pit. Where is a pit? in the earth.
Yeah.
Jonah in the belly. Messiah in the earth for 3 days. So just saying. Pattern. Then Joseph said to them on the third day, do this and you will live. I fear God. If you're honest, let one of your brothers remain as a prisoner in the guardhouse where you've been, while you go and bring grain for the hunger in your homes. And your youngest brother bring to me so that your words can be verified and you won't die. So they did. Then each man said to his brother, we're truly guilty for our brother. We saw the distress of his soul when he begged us for mercy, but we didn't listen. That's why this distress has come to us. So this is over 20 years later. They're finally feeling guilty and recognizing their guilt for what they did to Joseph. Finally.
Well, at least that we know of.
Yes. Reuben answered them and said, didn't I tell you that that's the firstborn? I told you.
Oldest brother.
I told you, don't sin against the boy, but you didn't listen. Now see how his blood is now accounted for. They did not know that Joseph was listening since there was an interpreter between them. So Joseph's still in the room. And he's been speaking Egyptian to them.
But they know.
And they've had a translator, and he knows Hebrew too. So he's been, again, disguising himself through his language. And he knows exactly what they're saying. So he's like, oh. He turned away from them and wept. When he turned back to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and tied him up before their eyes. So why do you take Simeon?
Well,
This is
Reuben
interesting.
just redeemed himself.
Yeah, Reuben. So Simeon was the second. Reuben was the first. Well, Reuben, he's just found out for the very first time that Reuben actually was like, don't do this to him. So who's next in line? Simeon.
Oh, okay.
Simeon's the next one. So Reuben, he was like, okay, Reuben, you're good now. I'm not going to worry about you. I'm going to take the next one. So he went after Simeon.
What's that called though when you hold somebody in exchange? What's that term?
Hostage.
Hostage. Not like I use it all the time. You know? Yeah.
Got a
Right,
hostage
that word.
situation.
Yeah, right.
Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return each man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. So it was done for them. Then they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left from there. As one of them opened his sack to give fodder to his donkey at the lodge, he saw his money. It was in the opening of his bag. So he said to his brothers, my money has been returned. Look, it's in my bag. Their hearts sank, trembling. Each one turned to his brother and said, what is it that God has done to us? So why is that a big deal? Yeah, he's like, we bought this from them. Why is our money here? If somebody finds this out, they're going to think we just stole it. We stole it. We took our money back. They stole the grain. When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. He's recapping this. The man, the Lord of the land, spoke with us harshly and took us as spies of the land. But we said to him, we're honest. We've never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I'll know if you're honest. Leave one of your brothers with me. As for the hunger of your homes, take and go. Then bring your youngest brother to me so that I may know you are not spies, but you are honest. I'll give you back your brother, and you can move about freely in the land. Now as they were emptying their sacks, behold, there was each man's bundle of money in his sack. When they saw their money bundles, they and their father, they were afraid. Then the father Jacob said to them, you have made me childless. Drama much? Like really? You got 12. You had 12 boys. But because of Joseph, and then now Benjamin, Joseph is no more. Now Simeon is gone, and next you'll take Benjamin. Everything is against me.
Oh.
Favoritism, like come on.
He must like to hang out with Eeyore.
Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, you can put my 2 sons to death if I don't bring him back to you. Put him in my hand and I will return him to you.
Wow,
He's offering his sons.
I know.
But he said, so fortunately, somebody's got some sense. My son will not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he alone remains. He alone remains.
He's definitely.
There's 10 of
The
them
brothers
still.
have got to feel terrible. Like, really, Dad? Come on.
Because like they're others.
And if harm should happen to him along the way you're going, You'll bring my gray hair down to Sheol, or the grave, in grief.
You think he was melancholic?
Do you think? And so it's the same thing he said about Joseph. When Joseph died, he said, I'm going to the grave and mourning Joseph. And now he's saying the same thing about Benjamin. None of the other y'all matter. Just these two.
I think this is also like revenge on Jacob though too. Like
Like we talked about sowing and reaping,
Yeah, because like
because of the deception and
before
stuff.
we were like, why is he getting away with this? But now he's reaping his consequences
Yep.
of deceiving
Yep.
Isaac with his mom.
Yeah, Jacob. We've this is like 3 weeks going now. I think now
Yeah.
we're seeing he's reaping what he sowed in the deception that he sowed into his brother and mother and father. But
Because
yeah,
like his favorite wife dies, he thinks
his favorite sons died.
and now they're trying to take his other
His other son,
favorite
his last favorite son. Yep. He's not gonna have any more favorites after this. Yep.
Apparently he doesn't have any more.
No, that's it.
Just the
There's
one.
no more children.
There's no more children. He's childless
No,
now.
I have 10 of you still.
I know there's 10 of y'all, but I'm childless. I don't have any more children. I don't know who you guys are. Any questions on 42?
It kind of makes you wonder though when Reuben spoke and said, "You can put my 2 sons to death," if that really meant anything to him, because Reuben doesn't even exist in his father's eyes.
Yes.
So screw his grandkids, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
Well, it's like in Sodom and Gomorrah
Sorry,
when Lot
you
says,
know,
"Go ahead and have my daughters." What kind of father does
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
I don't know. The men right now aren't really having a lot of cool
No,
points.
they're not.
Like, they're all like, okay, so far,
Choose your
except for
words
Joe.
carefully.
So you know.
Yeah.
One more point in 42, Rebecca actually thought of it, because it has so many parallels.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
All the money that was in the sacks,
Mhm.
Yeah.
earlier they were talking about they need the food for their salvation. Well, you can't buy salvation.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
It's good.
It's really good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was good.
See, this is why I invited him.
It was her.
It was her. It was her.
You're one. It counts. It counts.
Yep, that's right.
You gave the answer.
All right, any more questions on 42?
Well, he mentioned that. What about too? Remember Judas like tried to buy? He sold.
And
Jesus.
we're going to see a parallel to that.
Yeah.
Yep, in chapter 43. Let's go into 43. Now the famine was severe in the land. When they finished eating the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back, buy us a little food." But Judas said to him, "The man warned us firmly." So, time has passed.
Yeah.
Simeon's still in prison.
So he said, "Forget Simeon, you're not taking my son."
You're not taking my son.
Yep.
He said, that's basically what he said. He said, okay, well, I'm either going to lose Simeon or I'm going to lose Benjamin, so we're going to leave Simeon. That's basically what he said.
He's waiting, hoping the famine goes away.
Yes. But Judah said to him, "The man warned us firmly, saying, 'You won't see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy grain for food. But if you won't send him, we won't go down, because the man said to us, you won't see my face unless your brother is with you.' Then Israel said, 'Why do you do evil to me by telling the man that you had another brother?'" He's still worried about this one thing.
They just can't cut a break.
They said, this is what they said, this is the brothers. They said, "The man questioned particularly about us and about our relatives, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Do you have a brother?' So we spoke to him on the basis of these words. How could we possibly know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" Did he question them? He never questioned them.
That's not how that
If you go back and look at the story, he never questioned them. They volunteered the information.
Ah.
There's
I thought about it. I read that and I was like, wait a second. I backed up. I was like, they never said that.
So
He's trying to CYA.
did Joseph know that Benjamin existed?
Yes,
So he already knew.
He
They
knew.
just didn't know that he knew.
correct.
Okay, sorry, I got a little.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's what I was like.
just a thought. They could be sneaky and bring someone else besides Benjamin and Joseph not know.
Yes.
Just saying that's Benjamin.
Yes, that is true. They could have. I don't know.
They were not thinking. That's big brains right there. They
They needed you.
No.
They needed you,
They
Stephanie.
did.
They needed you.
Where were you when they needed you? Busy having a baby. 2,000 years later.
Then Judah said to his father Israel, "Please send the boy with me, and we'll get up and go, so that we'll live and not die, we, you, and our children. I myself will be his pledge. You can demand him back from my own hand. If I don't bring him back to you and place him before you, then you can blame me all of my days.
Wow.
If we had not delayed, we could have returned twice by now. That's how long it's taken them to have this argument about going down there.
You know how far it was?
I do not know. I don't know. Like it was probably
Canaan?
a ways. I mean, from where they are to Egypt is a good distance. I mean, I can pull up a map in a minute. We can look
I
at
remember
it.
reading it was like 11-day trip.
Probably, yeah.
11 days.
It's a pretty good ways, yeah.
And on a camel.
So they've been spending a month arguing about this.
Probably took
So
a month.
Reuben and Judah both guaranteed Benjamin's return, but Jacob listened to Judah. Why? So Reuben said this, Reuben guaranteed his return on the lives of his sons. Judah said, you can blame me. Just let me have them so we can go down there. So Reuben was pledging the life of his sons, but Judah pledged his own life.
Yeah, so I was thinking.
Reuben was being selfish. He was like, "Oh, you can have my boys. I'm not. I don't want. You can't have me."
Parents.
Yeah. Verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so," he's finally given in. "Then do this: take some of the best products of the land in your bags, and bring an offering down to the man." He's trying to butter him up a little bit.
How do you have the best fruits of the land in a famine?
So if you look at this, balsam, honey, gum, myrrh, pistachios, almonds. So a lot of these weren't like the big harvest fields. They probably had little areas they could still grow some things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was still
It just wasn't
minor
like
things that they could. Yeah.
Well, and those things all last.
Yeah.
So they could have still had them.
Yeah.
And it's a form of payment since
Yeah.
came back with money before.
Yep. So he's like buttering him up. He's like, give him some more stuff, and maybe he'll be nice to us. Also, take in your hand a double portion of silver. So he's going to take what they brought back that was supposed to have stayed there in the first place, and they're going to double it. They're going to put that much more on top of it to buy more grain. Perhaps it was a mistake, he
So real
says.
quick,
Yeah.
the actual straight line distance from Egypt to Canaan is 589, 83 meters.
So close to.
No.
Miles.
8,482 kilometers and some extra meters. But in miles, it's about 5,200 miles.
5,200
And
miles.
in camel miles.
Camel miles. Think about how far you could
Doesn't
walk
make
in a
sense.
day. Think about like if you're on a hike. You're not going that far. That's a long time.
California and back.
That's a big distance.
That doesn't seem that
No.
far.
We'll look at it. We'll figure it out. Yeah. All right, verse 13. Take your brothers too. Now get up and go back to the man. May El Shaddai grant you mercy before the man, so that he may release your other brother to you, along with Benjamin. As for me, I am bereaved. I am bereaved. Again, he's saying he's childless.
And he doesn't even say,
Thank you,
what's his name?
Benjamin.
S.
So, Simeon?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
didn't even say it.
He's not worried about
older
Simeon.
brother.
He's not worried. He said maybe you'll get Benjamin and that other guy you have that's your brother.
Your other brother,
Yeah.
not my other son.
Correct, your other brother.
Other brother.
It's like he's not mine.
That's like when you get mad at the kids and you say,
That's your son.
"That's your son
Yeah.
for you."
Definitely.
Then the men took this offering. They also took the double portion of silver in their hand, as well as Benjamin. So they got up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph.
Joe.
When Joseph saw Benjamin with him, he said to the one over his house, "Bring the men into this house, slaughter an animal and prepare it, for the men will eat with me this afternoon." So the man did as Joseph said, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. But the men were afraid because they had been brought into Joseph's house. They said, "It's because of the silver that was returned to our sacks the first time that we are being brought in, to pounce on us and fall on us, and to make us slaves along with our donkeys." So they think they're getting brought in to be punished.
Yeah.
So they approached the man who was over Joseph's house and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. "I beg your pardon, my lord," they said. "We indeed came to the previous occasion to buy grain or food. When we came to the lodge and opened our sacks, behold, there was each man's money at the opening of the sack, the full amount of our money, so we've returned it in our hand." And so at least they're being honest about it. They're like, "Hey, this is what happened. Hope you don't get mad at us for this. We don't know what happened."
Okay, I got the actual.
Okay, real quick.
Sorry. It's 148 hours to walk.
148 hours to walk.
48 hours.
148 hours.
727 kilometers.
Divide that, 10 hours.
48 hours.
14 days. 15 days. If you
Or
did,
divide by-
if you walk 10 hours a
I went to
day.
Google Maps that time. They're more
Yeah,
accurate.
there you go.
Oh.
Sorry about that, guys.
So it's a 14, 15 day trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, not just around the corner.
No. Moreover, we've brought down other money in our hand to buy grain for food. We didn't know who put our money in our sacks. Be at peace, he replied. Don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. Your money had come to me. Then he brought Simeon out to them. So the guy that's in charge of Joseph's house is acknowledging who their God and the God of their father is.
Oh, I thought that was Joseph saying all that.
No, they went to the man of the house.
Uh-huh.
And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, gave them water, and they washed their feet. He also provided fodder for their donkeys. So they prepared the offering for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they were going to eat there. When Joseph came home, they brought him the offering in their hand into the house, and they bowed down to the ground to him. So, once again, his dream is being fulfilled. Mm-hmm. Then he asked if they were well, and said, "Is he well? Your elderly father that you told me about, is he still alive?" Is he well? This word, is he well, is that the word there is shalom. And it means completeness, safe. Does he have everything he needs? It's usually translated peace in most Bibles, but it's actually a term of completeness. So he was like, does he have everything he needs? Like, do I need to send something else down to him? Is he good? Your servant, our father, is well, they said. He's still alive. Then they knelt and bowed down. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother, whom you mentioned to me?" Then he said, "May God be gracious to you, my son." Then Joseph hurried out, because his compassion grew warm and tender toward his brothers, so that he wanted to cry. So he went into an inner room and wept there. Wow. Then he washed his face, came out, and controlled himself. "Serve the food," he said. And this is where the story gets cool and interesting.
Not that it was
So they served him by himself, them by themselves, and the Egyptians who were eating with him by themselves. For Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, because this was an abomination to the Egyptians. So they have a meal, but they don't get to eat right there with Joseph. They eat in separate rooms. They were seated before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. The men looked at each other in astonishment. So Joseph's starting to give them clues.
Right.
So they just got set in birth order from oldest to youngest
How did you know
by
that?
someone who doesn't know them. Then portions were brought to them from before him, and Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of their portions.
Oh man,
It's his
they just can't get away from it.
Well, this is his blood brother.
The one
I know.
who
This is the brother from his mother.
The same brother's mother.
Yep.
The one that
Yet
didn't
they
put him
drank and made merry with
in the-
him.
The one that didn't put him in the pit.
Come on,
Right.
keep going. Any questions on 43?
No, I want to get to the next part.
Carrie,
This is- I'm telling-
Carrie said.
This is
I said he did all that for the brother that didn't put him in the pit.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
The brother.
He was too young. He was still a wee little lad.
Baby lad.
But yeah, the only thing that does stink about this portion is that it leaves us on a cliffhanger. You have to come back next week to hear the rest of the story.
I went ahead.
Is this really
I
the end of
didn't
it?
take it.
No, it's not. We still have half of the next chapter.
Offended.
Anything else? Any questions on 43 before we finish out this portion?
Just that Benjamin, I hope, had a big appetite.
Mm-hmm. They were probably like,
Remember, it wasn't
think about
famine.
this. They put them in age order
Birth order.
from
How did they
oldest
know
to
that?
youngest.
How did they know that?
Joseph knew. He was their
Joseph
brother.
knew.
So Joseph knew. He put them in order, and then he brings out 5 times more to the one that he knows is going to be the favorite, because he was the favorite. He knows. He knows that. He's like, wait a second. The youngest one didn't come with you. He's my blood brother. I was the favorite. Let me take a wild guess who the favorite is now.
Well, that's a nice little pattern of the least will be the greatest.
Yeah. All right. This is a little. I'm gonna detour for just a minute, and then we'll finish out with chapter 44, the first half of that chapter. So we've been talking about this duality of physical and spiritual, and we see these patterns all throughout Scripture, from the beginning to the end. And there's so much. We see Joseph pointing to Messiah. We see all throughout the Old Testament Messiah revealed. And so there's so much prophetic insight that goes on in the Old Testament that if we don't pay attention, we'll miss it. And so as I was studying this, I really felt the Lord was giving me some prophetic insight into bringing that into today. And so when we think about prophecy, prophecy really falls into three categories. What has happened, what is happening, and what will happen. Mm-hmm. And so we see the story of Joseph happened. We see this take place. Then we see this cycle repeat itself in Yeshua, in the life of our Messiah. And so I believe we're going to see the same pattern happen again. You know, we've studied enough to know that Yah operates cyclical. And so we see these patterns and they continue to happen. We see Old Testament into the prophets, into the New Testament, into Revelation, into the end times. What's going on? So I believe from reading this and studying this week that we are in a season of the 7 fat cows spiritually. We have seen more, we have more access to Scripture, to study material. We have the internet. We can look up anything. We can dig deep. We can learn the Hebrew. We can see these things more than what they had 100 years ago.
And Amazon.
Yeah, we've got Amazon. We can buy books. We can look. We've got Bible Hub. We have Eve Sword. I mean, we got all these study tools that we can get into. And true understanding of Scripture has come in like a flood in recent years. I mean, it's just the more. It seems the closer we get to Yeshua's second coming, that we're seeing this abundance of revelation that is poured out into the people of God as we continue on. So I believe we are in a season of gathering grain and storing up. We're in that point. We're in this point of we have access to so much that there's no reason why we're not digging in, why we're not studying, and why we're not storing up grain. I believe that a season is coming where our brothers are going to come to us for bread. So what is bread? What is bread represented in Scripture? The Word.
Yep.
That's life. Bread is life. I believe that those who are storing up in humility and compassion will be given a position of honor. We see Joseph was filled with compassion for his brothers. There wasn't, he was Pharaoh, basically.
Right.
Other than the throne, he had full control of Egypt. He could have done whatever he wanted to his brothers. Whatever he wanted. He knew what they did to him. Mm-hmm. Obviously. He knew what they did to him. He could have done whatever he wanted to, but he treated them with dignity, with honor, and with compassion. I believe that Yah is giving us a signet ring, linen garments, and a gold chain. He's putting people in places of honor, not for ourselves, but so that we can be in a position just like Joseph, that when the famine comes, we've been given the authority, we've been storing up grain, we've been given this position that we can continue to give bread and give life. So that's my little prophetic insight, little rant, that we're in a place now where we have so much access to stuff that we would do ourselves a disservice not to utilize this time that we're in and start storing up for the future. Genesis 44, we got 17 verses and we'll be done. I say that, but we're never done, because this is going to be a cliffhanger. Then he commanded the one over his household, saying, fill the men's sacks with as much food as they are able to carry, and put money in the opening of each man's sack. But my cup, the silver cup, in the opening of the sack of the youngest, along with his grain money. So he's putting his money back in there too. So he did as Joseph told him. When the morning dawned, the men were set off, they and their donkeys. They left the city and did not get far. When Joseph said to the one over his household, get up, go after the men. When you catch up to them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? He's not done with them yet.
He's just playing.
I'm not sure how much compassion.
Isn't this one from which my Lord drinks? He even uses it especially to discern by divination. What you've done is evil. So he caught up to them and spoke these words to them. They said to him, why does my Lord say such a thing? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing as this. Look, the money we found in the opening of our bags, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. So how could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whoever among your servants is found with it, let him die, and we will also be my Lord's slave. They don't know what they just said.
I know.
Even now, let it be according to your words, he said. The one with whom it is found shall be my slave, but the rest of you shall be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. He searched them, beginning with the eldest and finishing with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then, then they tore their clothing, and each one loaded up his donkey, and they returned to the city. So they're going back to Egypt.
Well, we know what they traveled on. It wasn't a camel.
Yeah. When Judah and his brothers entered Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell to the ground before him.
Wow.
What's this deed you've done? Joseph said to them. Didn't you know that a man like me can discern by divination? Then Judah said,
Yeah. Is he now talking to them in his in Hebrew, or is he?
So he's probably still using an interpreter.
Okay.
He hasn't given away that much of it yet.
I got you. Okay.
Then Judah said, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? How can we justify ourselves? God has exposed your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, both we as well as the one in whose hand the cup was found. So he's saying, we're all. You only said you got to keep the one. We're all going to be slaves now.
Well, they can't go home without.
Exactly. They're not going
to go back there.
No.
Judah knows better. Judah knows what he promised.
Right. That's
Judah said, if I don't come back with him, the guilt will be on me the rest of my days. He's like, I'm not going back home. I might as well stay here.
right.
Bad day.
But he said, far be it from me to do this. The one in whose hand the cup was found, he will be my slave. But you go up to your father's house in peace. And that's where we leave off.
Rude.
I mean, that's the favorite son. How in the world are you going to go in peace?
You're just not. You're just not.
There's no peace.
You're going to run away from home.
There's no peace.
You're going to go in pieces.
No peace. Any questions on chapter 44?
It's a mean spot to stop.
I know.
That makes no sense. To stop.
Who decided that?
Who knows?
Let's change that next year.
Any questions?
Was that divine perspiration?
All right, let's talk about the application. So we started this a few weeks ago by talking about how this is applicable to our lives. How do we take what we have learned and put it into practice? How do we apply this to our lives?
Don't buy grain in Egypt.
So one, do not get discouraged by the low points in your life. You know, we looked at Joseph. He started in a pit, was working his way out, and then wound up back in the pit. But he then came out and became ruler over Egypt. So don't be discouraged by the low points in your life. Look for divine intervention. This is an interesting thing that came out of this, and I didn't have time to go. Like, if I'd have gone into everything that there is in this, we'd be here tomorrow. So train up your children to have strong faith in Yah. So Joseph got sold into slavery when he was 17. 17. But he got into the house of Potiphar, winds up ruler over Egypt, and still has not forsaken his God. All of the stuff that he could have gotten involved in when he was in Egypt,
Right.
it would have been easy. I mean, they had so many deities, it would have been nothing for him to have gone off on another tangent. But God was using him, and he continued to stay the faith. Ask Yah to show you the areas in your life that he has given you authority. And we talked about authority. What areas in your life, where's areas that you have authority, that you can operate and display his power? Begin to store up grain now in preparation for the season to come. We talked about that. We're in a season where there's so much grain coming in. There's so many ways. You can easily do that. And I put this in there. What does that look like? Read more than you've ever read in the Word. Study more than you've ever studied. And be ready to give out bread with humility and compassion.
And
go ahead.
I'm sorry. And two, I mean, when you're studying and building your faith in the good times, you'll have an abundance to use when it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're in the pit.
Build up a surplus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got extra to get you through those famine years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's so easy that when we get in and we study and we read, it's too easy to get puffed up and arrogant with what you know, that your knowledge. But do this, store up stuff, but do it in humility and compassion. And that's it. That's the end of this one.
Woohoo!
So, any questions?